the impact of our proposals, which are within your paperwork, the budget savings, personal travel budgets, technology and digital changes. There are 4 recommendations or actions in the papers today, and I must say thank you to Sam Mee, who has written this report before you today. I now hand you over to James Wilson, Chairman, should you need to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Penny. That all came through loud and clear, so technology worked well. James, anything you wish to add?
Yeah, I'll keep it brief because Councillor Carpenter's covered most of what I was going to say, really. But yeah, I think as Penny's indicated, the vision here very much is that children are educated as locally as possible, which minimises the time that they spend in vehicles travelling to schools, and obviously also minimises the level of spend on home to school transport. And obviously this, and then within that, what we're trying to do is make sure that the administration of the transport is as efficient as it can be, as high quality as it can be, and as financially as efficient as it can be, recognising that the more we have to spend on homeschool transport, the less budget we have to spend on wider direct delivery services to children. So the paper before you today does have quite a lot of detail on proposals that are specifically designed around efficiency and savings, and this has been an area of substantial financial growing spend in previous years. I'm pleased to report that on the finance side of things, you can see that we've balanced the budget in the most recent financial periods and are on track to do so again in this financial year, which I think is positive. But I do also want to recognise the service delivery side of this. So although we are looking to minimise the level of transport expenditure, it is a hugely important service in its own right. It's a hugely complex service in its own right, moving 18,600 children at the last count around the county under Norfolk sort of organised schemes every single day is an enormous logistical undertaking, which we shouldn't underestimate the scale and complexity of, and I pay tribute to the teams that organise that. And as Councillor Carpenter has outlined, our track record in general is positive here, and there are some councils that really struggle to just deliver the service, and sadly some children have to wait substantial periods of time without education because of the lack of transport, and that's not been the pattern in Norfolk, which I think we should be really proud of. But equally, I do want to call out, there's a section I think at 3.2.5 which highlights some of the challenges that we do experience. So I don't want to pretend that this isn't without its challenges. And families, and particularly families where there are children with special educational needs and disabilities, do complain to the council or have concerns, most typically around the timings of routes, if transport operators change, or obviously decisions around eligibility and funding. And the service is working equally as hard to provide the best possible service in that, to be relationship-based in the way that it engages with those families, and to improve our sort of customer experience as it is to save money. And so I just want to sort of call out that we're working hard on both fronts. I won't talk you through all the proposals in the paper because they're there for you, but we'll happily take questions on any aspects of this. But hopefully it's a helpful update, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, James. I've got my birthday vice chair. Didn't know it was his birthday, did you? Birthday celebrating vice chairman going first. It is his birthday after all. John, Councillor.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, there are biscuits in the kitchen for just to, if anybody does want to join me in my celebrating my birthday later. Right, I mean, having read this paper, I must congratulate the team on what they've done and achieved since I had many conversations with most of the faces here about home to school transport, in particular Nicky Park and Dawn, who we used to engage with and say, what can we do to break even and not find that we had a budget pressure at the end of the year. So I do congratulate you on where we are, where we come from, and what we have achieved. Because at times, I know a few years back, it did look an impossible situation. But I know we set up working groups, and we're now in a place where 3.26 and 3.27, where it says a balanced budget is achieved, is a really I think actually an amazing situation to be in, because as you've identified, other councils across the country are not. They're still struggling to get a balanced budget on home to school transport. And I know we are saying we've still got to learn from other councils, and it's always easier to pick up other people's ideas and come up with inventing the wheel yourself. So I like the proposals that are in front of us, the way ahead where we can achieve this. And I say to get 18,600 kids across 6,000 miles of roads on a daily basis is a pretty good achievement. So just carry on the way we've been going. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't know that needs a response. But
okay, I'm not sure there was a question in there, but I thank you. That's for really kind words. But I guess I would just want to highlight that some of the financial success comes from successfully delivering a range of quite innovative schemes, and there's some really positive things here, like the sort of independent travel training, which I think are a positive thing for children and support their degree of independence, whilst also saving money. And so I think there is a good track record here of us doing sensible things that can deliver efficiencies whilst also not reducing the service quality offer. But we should also say we have put money in. Part of the reason for a balanced budget is not simply that we've spent less, it's that we've recognised that this is an area of growing demand and spend, and planned for that ahead of time and put the money in. So I guess I almost want to reassure the committee, this isn't a programme of reductions, this is a programme of investment actually, as well as making some efficiencies. And so every year that we do look for savings, if you like, from home to school transport, quite rightly in the department, but we also make a further investment in the level of demand that's there. And obviously the second paper today talks about SEND in a wider sense, and until we get to a world in which more children are being educated in mainstream education, the total investment in transport will continue to increase, and that's part of the reason for the budget balancing.
Thank you. And I'll add you to the list, Maxine. I've got quite a list down now. The first of which is Councillor Adams, Tim Adams, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the reports, and happy birthday, Councillor Fisher. I wanted to first of all ask about the personal travel budgets and whether they will cover the true cost of fuel and vehicle maintenance for parents. Has cost of living data, has that sort of data been used to sort of assume these costs? Because what happens when these costs rapidly increase in these uncertain times? Is there a safety valve? Is there a reserve to account for this? And indeed, are we going to be flexible enough to actually deal with that situation? I think, secondly, there's this sort of issue of deliverability versus pressure on families arising from an increasing shift of responsibility to parents. So I suppose, are these realistic or fair expectations amid, as you said, increasing special educational needs? Thank you.
Okay, so I'll begin and answer on the first one on the personal transport budget. So I might bring John in on some of the detail, particularly around the sort of next evolution of that. So personal transport budgets, I think, are a really positive part of the range of solutions that can work for families. I want to stress at the moment it is an offer and it is an optional thing rather than a mandatory thing. It currently works effectively on a standard mileage rate, which is sort of relatively normal and is intended to cover the cost of providing that transport. But I think it's, where families would judge at the moment that it doesn't, and it doesn't work either financially or in terms of fitting that into their life, they can choose not to have a personal transport budget and therefore to have a bus or a minibus or a taxi arrangement. But that's part of the reason for the thinking about what we're looking at piloting in the next iteration, is that actually that being true means that there are some families who might potentially want to transport their own children or organise it themselves, but it doesn't work financially or logistically for them. But actually the council providing a taxi might be, in that instance, would be dramatically more expensive for us than them doing it. And so part of what's being proposed in this paper as a pilot of an evolution of that would be a scheme whereby we would look at the costs in the round in a way that's more sophisticated than just a standard mileage rate, and where it would make sense to pay more, then we could, because that would still be better for the family and obviously a saving compared to sending a taxi. But that's an evolution. At the moment, it works on a standard mileage rate, which is sort of relatively normal. I don't know whether, John, you might want to come in a bit more on that detailed piece of work.
I think just a couple of bits that I'd add in is that engagement with parent and carer groups around this pilot is absolutely crucial, and we've begun that work, but it is at quite an early stage. And that what we're seeking here is to see, not just in terms of improving the lives of children and the ability of families to transport their own children to school independently, but how that whole programme of improving that child's independence and that family's ability and enhancing their ability to transport them to school with more independence might actually improve their independence in their wider life as well. But engagement with those families that we pilot, the next evolutions of this are going to be absolutely key.
I guess the second part of the question was about the sort of expectations on families in the context of this, and that's a difficult question to answer because it's quite sort of abstract, and there's lots of different scenarios that families might be in. I think what I would want to say is that for most situations, the offer to that family is a strong one, in the sense of, if a child is going to a more specialist setting, that it is responsibility of the county council to organise transport such that they can get there, and in most instances they're picked up from home and taken directly there, and even if actually that's requiring an individual taxi to do so with no other children involved, because that's the only way for that to happen without the family doing it themselves, and that is what happens. So that is, in some ways, you could argue, quite a high standard of service that is being received there. But I also don't want to downplay the fact that families with children with special educational needs, there is often a level of additional strain and complexity and support for those services, and sometimes the needs of those children are such that any, for example, change of transport provider, or if the way that taxi operator interacts with that child isn't bang on and quite skillful, that can create some quite difficult scenarios, and there's a real strain for families around all of that. So I would not want to downplay the challenges that these families experience in interacting with these things. And as you can perhaps imagine, across that scale of volume, it isn't always possible to say that exactly the same driver will turn up every single time, for example, and that person might be sick, and then if somebody else arrives the next day who hasn't got that previous relationship or that skill set, then that can be quite disruptive. So I wouldn't, it's hard to answer your question in a sort of yes or no way. I think I'd want to be saying that, you know, I think we do a very good service and provide a lot within the budget that's available, but I wouldn't want to downplay the complexity for some families.
Thank you. I've got quite a list, top of which is Councillor Smith-Clare. Mike, over to yourself, please.
Thanks, Chair, and happy 50th birthday, John. Okay. I'd also like to take this moment before I do ask my question to say a huge thank you to everyone that I'm facing now. Your work is amazing, and it's been a pleasure being part of this team for the last nearly 10 years. So thank you, and that's the same with the committees, and congratulations to you, Brian, on being an excellent chair. I know through personal experience the value and importance of transporting young people to provision, and we know that particularly if it's a long journey, that does affect that young person's learning when they do get to their centre of training or teaching, and that does form part of their own learning journey. It's essential. And the point that I'd like to pick up on, it's something that James mentioned, that's 3.2.5, and that was some of the challenges that we have faced and we're continuing to face, and that is particularly some of the differences and changes that take place with transport operators. And again, I know from my experience, once there has been that change, there is quite an impact on that young person's emotional well-being and of course their ongoing engagement within learning. I would seek a reassurance that when we are looking at some of those challenges, particularly changes in operators, that there is that reassurance that we have got a continuing experience, sustainability and quality of those operators transporting those young people. I appreciate the service is complex and we are of course looking at efficiency and savings, but I do request, particularly when we look further down the line, what are we doing to ensure that there is that experience, professionalism understanding of those young people's needs, because as I said at the start, the importance of that transport in helping them with their learning journey is key. But again, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor, and thanks in particular for the kind words at the outset of that. I guess I'll begin to intro, but I might well pass to the experts who sort of who certainly get all of the credit in this particular service area more than I do. I think what I'll just comment is that absolutely the needs of the children are factored in. This is not a situation where we just look at all children equally, if that makes sense, and as sort of logistical numbers on a spreadsheet to be moved around. Where you've got children with special educational needs and disabilities in particular, the transport team do have access to the information and liaise with the operational teams to try as best they can to understand that particular situation. And when contracting, we are aiming for example, consistency of provision. If we know that child is going to be going to that same school for the next phase of education, if we can line that up in such a way that it gives them a consistent service from the same company, we will do that. If we are told by that family that it's not working and we can immediately see that, that does get fed in and considered. But what that doesn't mean is we can absolutely guarantee that there will never be a change of transport provider during, for example, a secondary school career. In some cases, you've got an individual transport going just for that one child, but you might also have a minibus, for example, that you might commission a route for 3 years, and at the end of those 3 years you recommission it and a different company wins the route, and so that will on some occasions mean that you have a change of provider, a change of driver mid phase, if you like, and that's challenging. And again, the team do try to manage those transitions as best they can, but I don't want to pretend that isn't without its complexities, and sometimes goes really, really smoothly, on other occasions less so. I'll probably stop there and let the guys come in, but because they've got the detail around your question, I think.
To Nikki, yeah, please.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. So yes, it is a challenge. We do try to keep contracts for as long as we can. We obviously do have a duty as well to test best value all the time. So our contracts are typically between 5 and 8 years. So, and then when that change happens, it is managed quite carefully. The team, when they're doing a review of school transport, they work very closely with schools, especially with the special schools, to understand if they're rerouting something, which children potentially couldn't share together. We do check with the school whether they think the routes are reasonable in terms of the children and their needs and how they'll cope. And then that change is managed quite carefully between the old transport provider and the new one. So we'll ask the new provider to do a meet and greet with the family to make sure the young person has met their new transport staff. And yeah, change is inevitable, I'm afraid, because we have got contracts and we have to keep to the end date and we have to re-procure. But we do work very closely with schools to make sure it's as easy as possible. And all the transport staff do undertake a training course that we've developed ourselves, so that one of my team gets to meet all the drivers and passenger assistants as she's training them to make sure they've absolutely understood what their responsibilities are for that kind of quality for the transport.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Ward next. John, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, it's a good report and I'm pleased to see progress is being made. I wanted to ask, has it been considered, and would it be legal, in fact, for some of these SEND children to be educated at home via a live video link, please?
So it takes the transport out of it.
Well, I hadn't anticipated that question in quite that way. So obviously there are children educated at home. Elective home education is one of the options, and some families can choose to do that. And so there are children educated at home. There are also children who are out of school, either because they've been permanently excluded or in other circumstances, medical needs. So there's a range of factors which might mean that they are receiving a tutoring package that is largely home-based. So in that sense, yes, that does happen, and obviously where that happens, there isn't the transport bill. But in broad terms, the council's position is very much we want children in school, and so in that sense, it would never be a consideration to look at suggesting a home-based package of education because it led to a transport reduction in cost, or because the child happened to live in a really difficult place to get to, which some of them do. and it's worth emphasising, quite a lot of the individual taxis you hear about exist because of the geographical location of the child. So we do send the transport to where the children are, and we don't encourage or facilitate home-based education because of the transport considerations. The two things are separate. But where it is the case, you are right that then there are online tutoring does occur for a number of children.
Okay, so yeah, something that's considered. I think I've got Leslie next, please. Councillor
Thank you,
Bainbridge.
Chairman. You may or may not want to answer this question, or may not be able to. A resident mentioned to me a few weeks ago that she knows somebody who has a mobility scheme vehicle, but her child is still picked up by taxi. The person that mentioned it to me had a child in special school, but she used to take her child to school. So I think she was, I haven't been able to answer, and I've looked in the policy and I couldn't see it there. If somebody has a mobility vehicle because of their child, do we expect them to take the child to school themselves? Is that included in the numbers? And can I just say, I didn't realise there were so many children being transported around, so I think you've done an amazing job and reported well. Thank you.
Thanks. So the team may come in to correct me on this, but I think on the issue of mobility vehicles, there's no link between whether someone does or doesn't have one of those vehicles and whether they qualify for statutory duties. So the two policy areas are separate, and so the statutory duty that we have as an authority to provide homeschool transport for a child who's educated in a specialist setting is unchanged by whether or not they have already separately been allocated one of those vehicles. Obviously, we do talk to families about, in practical terms, what's your plan to get your child to school. And as we mentioned earlier, when Councillor Adams asked a question about personal budgets, where families can, in one way or another, transport their own children, they have the option to do that personal budget rather than to have a taxi or a minibus visit. And so that dialogue does go on, but there's no, unless I'm about to be corrected, there's no rule that says if you have a mobility vehicle, therefore you don't qualify for the homeschool transport offer.
So that would be national policy change would have to happen for that to take the responsibility
I believe
away
that's right.
from us.
I don't think
because there's already a vehicle being provided, etc.
Yeah, I don't think it's within our gift to change that. Yeah.
No, definitely. Okay.
Thank you. I was going to say, if it was the case, then perhaps we ought to be encouraging more parents to have mobility vehicles, but it's not. Thank you.
Okay, and next I've got Councillor Webb. Maxine, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to point out as well that mobility vehicles don't drive themselves, so obviously that means a person has to drive the car, and you know, parents don't have other things to do as well. I'm still quite shocked by Councillor Ward's question. Sorry. I wanted to say that I have a positive experience of the homeschool transport that the council runs, so I want to, thank everyone for that. I know that obviously it is complex and there are challenges and things change and the, placements change and so on. And our experiences has always been, pretty good, good. And so, I wanted to acknowledge that, even when there are, as you say, there are always issues and changes and things. And I think most people and most parents do appreciate that. And, people are ill and so on. One thing that I would like to suggest, and I don't know whether we've got an option to make some suggestions in here, is just around the training of staff on vehicles, because that's one thing that, like with the PAs on school transport, I've had them actually kind of sort of say to me that we would like to have more training, or we'd like to be able to understand your child's needs better. And I think that sort of accessing that level of training seems to be quite difficult. And I don't know whether that's the responsibility of the company or the local authority, but I think that would definitely benefit, particularly when there are staff changes and so on, and you have to get to know a child. And I know that that's going to take time anyway, but that would just be something that would be beneficial, I think, if there is an option. So I'll just say that for now. I've just got one other thing as well. But
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
I'll just add on to that. I mean, my experience was absolutely superb for my child to get to and from a special speech and language unit, you know, and the guy who was the allocated taxi driver, you know, he came, he got him dead on the same time every day, absolutely spot on. And but when you're reliant on someone like that, I mean, he was an owner-operator Hackney carriage license. He was working, you know, obviously during the day on the ranks, as you know, outside the railway station, picking up outside the pubs at leaving out time and so on. You can't guarantee that the car is going to be available all day, every day, forever, and things do happen. But we were touch wood, we never had a problem. But you are reliant on those things working, and sometimes vehicles go wrong. You could have an accident the night before, you know, whilst working, cars out of action. But, you know, there's all those things that have to be taken consideration of. And just sort of a little bit bolting on to what Maxine asked, given that scenario, do we separately vet those that are already vetted? Because I know the district councils, city council, they have a system of vetting, including sort of equivalent of the old SRB checks for taxi drivers, Hackney carriage drivers, private hire licence holders. They all get through a vetted process. Do we do that as well as, or more than, and are there savings and efficiencies perhaps, if that is the case, coming forward through local government reorganisation? So that's a bit techie for those people, Nikki and Sam probably. But yeah, thank you. Who's Nikki, please? Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. Is that on? Yeah. The training is kind of joint responsibility between the operator, but also the county council. So we have only just recently introduced the face-to-face course that I mentioned earlier. So we are now kind of getting through all the staff that are kind of employed with those operators, and it is proving very successful. And I think all the staff that come on that are finding it very useful. But it is quite generic because all children's needs are different, aren't they? So two things we rely on quite a lot is that meet and greet with the parent. So we do send as much information to the transport office as we can about the child that we know, but we ask the transport company to take that information to the parent and say anything else you can tell me about your child before the transport starts. So that's at the meet and greet. For example, if a child is starting in September for the first time. And then also we ask schools to sometimes hold training courses for the transport staff that are doing that school, because that can be much more specific around the children that go to that school. And that works very, very well. We get all the drivers and passenger assistants to go to the school, and the school deliver the training about their particular environment and their particular children, which does really go down well as well. So I think we've definitely providing more training than we ever used to, and we've started that over the last couple of years to provide more than we did before. So hopefully that is improving. In terms of the DBS checks, we do double check at the moment because I think, I'm not saying we've got the district councils are looking for something different than what we're looking for, because obviously we're looking at a DBS check in terms of the clients that person will be transporting. So we do re-look at it at the moment. So yes, under LGR, if it all came under one place, then we would probably be able to only do the one check and check once.
I mean, it's better that two checks are done and everything's safe, but if it's all in one department and the understanding is there that, you know, you're not just licensing somebody who might be taking people who've had too much to drink of a night back from the pub or the nightclub, and you're actually transporting vulnerable children, you know, those checks ought to be consistent, because actually a taxi driver who picks a fare up could be picking up someone in exactly those same vulnerabilities. So, you know, it's important that the work is done, and yeah, that's potentially an efficiency there if that needs to be only done once, which is good. Let me see, who have I got next? Maxine, you want to come back? Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, please. Yeah, just around the consultation work. And I know you say you're only just at the early stages, So fair enough. I mean, I look forward to seeing what that is going to look like, you know, as a parent carer myself. So it'd be interesting to see what the content of the detail of the proposals. And I think the personal travel budget idea of making that more flexible is really good. That could be, you know, really positive, I think, to make it work for those people who where it is better for them, as long as it does remain, you know, voluntary and not something that is enforced. But I think legally that probably wouldn't be possible. I just wanted to talk about the post-16 changes that you're proposing in terms of, I think it says that you want to make it, is it page 15 I've written down, more adherence to, sorry, I'm just going to find the page. No, is that not the right page? Have I got the wrong? Oh, thank you, page 17.
Review of post-16 offers, page
yes,
17.
Sorry,
That's
yes.
right, yeah.
I'm a bit concerned about, it seems like we're moving to making it sort of, you know, making it as low cost as possible, which I understand the reasons, but are we going to be putting more barriers into attending places of education? You know, we had a discussion on NEET at a previous committee, and one of the things we did talk about was, you know, transport to places of education and training and so on was a factor. And if we're going to be making it potentially harder, is that what we're saying here, that we're going to take away some of the, I'm not quite sure what the detail is around here, but I just want to raise that as a bit of a concern, because, and also I think the consultation for that is happening quite soon, and the proposals look like they're going to be coming in sooner on the timeline. So is that sort of starting, and what's that going to look like, please? Thanks.
James, please.
I think there may be some misunderstanding here. Can I first check that we're reading the same section of the report? So you're talking about the set of bullet points under review of post-16 offer, which is at the bottom of section 3.2.10. That's right. Right. So to be clear, what that section is describing to you is that's a range of things that other local authorities, not Norfolk, are doing. So what we are seeing as a pattern nationally is that quite a few councils, all in the same boat around escalating costs, are making various moves around this. And one of the areas where you have more flexibility in statute is around the post-16 offer, as opposed to the sort of statutory school age. So we've summarised the committee there in broad terms, things that other councils are doing. So none of those things there are a Norfolk County Council proposal at this time, to be really, really clear. But I suppose the reason for including them is that actually they're perhaps of relevance, because they would be considered, and you know, there will be further savings targets for all future authorities in any event. And so we'd always give councillors those sorts of options. So to be clear, there is no plan to implement anything in that list at this point in time, but potentially a future council might choose to look at them.
Thank you. So what we're looking at is a document on exceptional transport, the wording of that. Is that what you're doing?
I might bring John in on the detail of this bit.
Yes, so within our current transport policy, we specify some examples of when exceptions to the normal transport policy might be applied. And what we find is that actually that isn't necessarily a helpful thing to do, because if you write something in a policy that say this would be an exception, well, why don't you just write it into the policy that it's a thing that you do? So we think there's a piece of work to do to actually remove some of those examples that can be quite limiting and suggest these are things we will fund and therefore other things we might not, and have exceptions that are much more what it says on the tin, that these are, you know, there will always be personal circumstances where the combination of factors are such that actually it's right that we should provide transport, even though it technically does not tick all the correct boxes to tick the straightforward eligibility box. And we think that the way that that's worded in the current policy is misleading and not particularly helpful, and we can do better in that area. So that's what we seek to work with parent-carer groups about, how we can make that much clearer and what maybe shouldn't be in that list and what and possibly what should. But that's separate to that section around post-16, which is, as James says, just the list around other things that other local authority areas, some of which are in very different geographical circumstances to Norfolk, have looked at. And inevitably, when you look at a rural county and many children living in quite isolated areas where there are not transport options available, the law is clear that we need to step in, and we're not seeking to not do so, because we want to enable children to access education. At the heart of all of this is the purpose of it.
Right, thank you. Councillor Riley, next. I've got you down on the list. Steve, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of transparency, 3.2.17 of the report, increasing transparency regarding decision-making and financial reporting. I can see that there's the 6 components there of the dashboard, but I was just wondering if it was possible for the new HTST to also include a clear matrix showing how send placements decisions drive transport demand, so we're just not looking at the individual components in isolation. Is that possible to have a threading through matrix in terms of that?
Yeah, thank you. So I think that section of the report is highlighting the sort of, again, quite complex detailed work to combine all the information that's actually held in several different council data systems at the current time in such a way that it gives a really sort of clear and robust and accurate point of view. It doesn't show it in the graphic, but of course one of the key components for us as managing all of this will be able to see the different types of transport for the different need profiles, and to be able to isolate the SEND spend from mainstream and post-16 and all the rest of it. So I think if that's what you're driving at, I'd want to give you reassurance that that transparency will be there. Yeah.
And it's really so that committees can actually see that, to scrutinise it. So if that can be demonstrated via a method in terms of a matrix that committees can scrutinise, I think that'd be helpful actually.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the colleagues to my right could quote you the numbers right now in terms of just the level of the number of children and the level of relative spend on those different categories. If that's what you were after, that could be provided perhaps subsequently as a quick note relatively easily.
Yeah, I think if we drill down to that sort of level of detail, we run the risk of, we've still got to provide irrespective of, haven't we? So if we drill down and say, that category of is costing us that much, I get the point where Steve is coming from, but ultimately we've got to deliver that service, and it's how we do that efficiently and effectively. That ticks the boxes for the young people that are getting transported. But I can see that understanding a drill down in those figures would give us an idea of how the spend is split. But other than that, what are you hoping to achieve, Steve?
If you can see, if you're looking at these components individually, which obviously you have to do and drill in, but an overall matrix just showing how that's driving. The send demand is driving it, because we're going to experience a whole new ball game here in terms of send from the government coming out, and it's how that interreacts with this that I think is going to be quite interesting over the next year or two.
Something to consider for a future update. I would suggest in a year's time or whenever is appropriate.
Yeah, happy to consider that. And again, just for the transparency in the room today, it is absolutely the case that the total volume of spend in transport is the majority of that is now coming from SEND, and if you like, the cost per child is dramatically higher for the obvious reasons that you've got children travelling on unusual routes in individual transports rather than in buses. So that is the state of play, but the numbers could be provided to show that.
And actually, if people were re-tendering to do work, this week, compared to 3 weeks ago, we may be getting different figures from those operatives, literally because of present circumstances. And on top of that, I know that the Chancellor of the Exchequer is considering mileage rates at which you don't incur tax liabilities for those people who, get reimbursed for mileage for things. And motoring organisations are saying instead of the 45 pence that's been for 15 years or however long, that now ought to be 67 pence. And of course, if that gets publicised and that becomes the norm, then obviously people's expectations of what it costs to drive a car goes up accordingly. So it will affect the perception of what those professional drivers are looking to achieve. Yes, I think next I've got Mr. Nicklin. Cyril, please.
Thank you. First of all, well done. I think you're doing a brilliant job, and it is, having worked in behaviour schools in Kent and seeing what happens every night when the children try to get out to their taxis or buses, it's a nightmare. And the other thing that I think as a committee we have to acknowledge is the fact that every child is different, and consequently, just because two children live in the same village or the same town, they can't and go to the same school, they can't necessarily be transported together because of their SEND needs. And consultation with the schools that they go to is imperative for that to happen, along with continuity, as you said, the 5 to 8 year programme with the renewal of contracts, because having the same drivers, some child with autism, just by saying one thing wrong, that would send them off for the whole day. Or not having that driver might mean that they don't go into school that day. So that's very important to do. I think the wording bit is imperative, because exceptional, what is exceptional? So we've got to drill down, as you just mentioned, on things like that. The other thing that I've noticed, and nobody's mentioned this, is school zone transport. I know that's more difficult because that government, I'm of the age where when I did my test, I can now drive anything up to 7.5 tonnes, a road roller and a minibus. And I do remember doing the Norfolk County Council minibus test, which is quite nice. But that's, more and more staff in schools can't now do that because of the age of the staff that are in it. But how much progress has been made on that own transport, especially in secondary schools where you've got inclusion units where the children can go and they want to do after school curriculum. Most of the football or sports is after school. If a child's got SEND, they can't then get home because there is no transport to get home. So how can we facilitate that? And one way would be for school zone transport, presumably, hopefully.
James, please.
So thanks, Councillor, for the warm words, and with all due respect to colleagues in Kent, it's always nice to hear that we're doing something better than another large local authority. So that's great. I guess on the topic of school zone transport, I might ask Sam and Nikki to come in again here, because we have looked at this. So there is something in the concept of that, and actually working with schools or groups of schools around whether they could work with us to put together a setup that's different to us running everything ourselves. It is complicated. As you can perhaps imagine, the resilience of a service is of critical importance, and so anything that's organised either by an individual family or by a school can sometimes be less resilient than the sort of county administered scheme. And so it might appear like it's going to go fine, but if that one school minibus breaks down, we've got other options. They might not. So it's not without its complexities, but I might ask the guys to sort of talk a bit about the exploring of that we have done.
Thank you. So it is complex, but we do know that there are schools that have got vehicles that are doing nothing on some days that they could use, and they've all got drivers as well. So I think when we, certainly at SEND schools, where we know familiarity is one of the big drivers, it's working with schools to find those schools that would want to take their own children to school and back home again, because of the benefits that would bring to the child. However, there are complexities in that, because it is still our duty, and in discharging our duty to the school or enabling the school to do it, we need to make sure we're satisfied that they can do the job consistently and to the same level that we do it. So we are currently working with the school to see if that is a possibility and something that could be scalable, but we're not in the place of we can confirm that we can do it or we can't, but it's definitely an opportunity that we want to explore.
Yeah, for school minibus is you know, fundraising to buy one, etc., and it sits there all day apart from when they take, you know, the first 11 out to play football somewhere. You know, that's really not good use of that resource and could be utilised far better. So it's, yeah, it's definitely something that we need to explore. Now, before I go to John for a final word, Penny, Councillor Carpenter, anything you wish to add from the discussion that you've heard thus far?
No, I think the discussion has been very helpful. There's very helpful comments made by members, and yeah, we are doing the very best that we can do to deliver for the children and the families, and that's always in my mind from this particular service, that we do an exceptionally good job. So I don't think I've got anything else to add, Chairman.
No, excellent, thank you. John.
Thanks, Chairman. Just the fact I missed out a question in my previous, I thought I'd better come back with one, otherwise the Chairman will be complaining. Just a couple of points. I think the initiative of training our children to use public transport, I think, is excellent, because that then gives them a skill for the rest of their life. But question-wise, I know contracts are set in advance, and I'm just wondering whether the current fuel crisis will impact on any contracts if they're coming up now, or if there's a flexibility where the contractors, service providers can come back to us and say fuel has gone up drastically. It hasn't gone up drastically yet, I know, but knowing contractors and service providers, they would normally try to find any opportunity to increase their prices. So I just wondered whether there is a risk with that impacting on this year's budget, or do we think we've got it under control?
I probably will.
If they hadn't thought about it, they have now, John. Thank you. James.
I was going to say thanks, John, for the market management there. I think it's. I'll probably pass to Nikki to give you most of the detailed answer. And the short answer is yes. This is a challenge we have experienced in the past. You know, most recently when the Ukraine war broke out some years ago, there was a spike in fuel prices at that time, and also linked to some previous sort of national policy decisions. You see that fluctuates. I would say the fuel cost is only one part of the total cost, and it's by no means the biggest part. The main thing you're paying for is the vehicle and actually the person to drive it. So I wouldn't want to sort of over-egg the extent to which it completely changes the price point of a transport, but it's definitely a factor. So if the oil price stays where it is today for the next year, next year's budget will have a significant hole in it. So that's pretty clear. Obviously, where we have existing contracts in place, we can have the leverage. That isn't to say providers won't come back and ask for, or what they'll do is think, well, if you haven't been able to give me an uplift during the current contracting period, when it comes to renegotiation in a year's time, I will have to make up my price differently. So it's a market management thing, and there's a whole strand of work on the supply side to look at contract length and what you bake into the terms and conditions around how you iron out those fluctuations. Nikki's the expert rather than I.
Nikki.
Well, I don't know about expert, James, but yeah, it's a good question. Obviously, we're now going into a new financial year, so you know, contracts do have a kind of a review on the 1st of April about, you know, what the uplift might be. So, but that is really the only flexibility there is. It's an annual review of price. Contracts don't allow for prices to go up and down, because you know, we need to have a set budget and we've only got so much money to spend. So if we're asked questions by operators, we'll see what they have to say. We might have to go through that very complex procedure we went through last time, but hopefully not. I mean, prices do go down as well, so it is swings and roundabouts, and that's the message to operators at the moment, is that, you know, the price is the price that you quoted when you quoted for it.
Thank you. So, committee, we have a number of recommendations that are set out on page 12 of our agenda. 1.1, 1.2 and 1.3 are all to note, which I'm sure we can do. 1.4 is to make any recommendations to Cabinet on further areas that could be explored to enhance outcomes for children and families, strengthen the overall effectiveness of the service and support the long-term financial sustainability of home-to-school transport. And this is, of course, against the backdrop that numbers of birth rate has dropped in Norfolk. There's less pupils coming through the system, but a bigger number that are SEND, and therefore more complex in terms of the packages that are provided. Are there any specific recommendations that anyone on the committee would like to put forward, or do we hope that our line of questioning has given us what we need to know about how things are going, and therefore can fully endorse the direction of travel? Any thoughts? Maxine, recommendation, please.
Well, I was just going to ask, are we going to, once we've had the trials and the pilots and so on, will it come back here first before, what will be the next stage after that happens of the proposals that you're making?
I would very much hope that it comes to a future children's and families committee, even if we're not all around to be here to see it. But I think it's important that that's noted for our own forward work, to make sure that that doesn't get missed, because we're, as well as scrutiny, we're also policy development, and that will be policy that's evolving and developing. So I think it would be important that it came back.
I would say, because it will have the consultation information in there, won't it? And it'd be good for us to see as a committee what the sort of feedback has been from the proposals from families and so on.
Absolutely, yeah. With committee's endorsement, we'll consider that when we look at our forward work programme at the end. Otherwise, are we all in agreement with the recommendations as set out in the agenda? All agreed? Thank you. Moving on to, I think, page 31 of our agenda, and that is SEND and AP improvement supported by Local First Inclusion Transformation Programme, and this is a discussion paper with a presentation only, and that is coming forward from responsible cabinet member again is Penny Carpenter. Penny, do you want to introduce anything and then pass over to officers at this point?
I think it's probably best to introduce officers introduce this, because I think that would be better in this instance. Thank you.
Okay, I'll look to you, James, and you delegate it, I'm sure. No, he's taking
well, I will intro again if the committee can bear more of my voice. But the team around me will probably pick up lots of the questions you might have about this. So I guess just to recap on the intent of the paper, and it has evolved a little bit because obviously we didn't know when the national reforms would be published, and they've now come through in recent weeks. So I think the paper is doing two things. It's giving you a brief update on the performance and the sort of impact, if you like, around the current work that's been going on in Norfolk over a number of years around SEND transformation. Is a bit of a sort of high-level stock take, and then its main task is to give you an overview of the reforms that have been recently published. And obviously there's a link in there to the full documentation that I imagine committee members will have been reading as well in full. So I can take you through some of the sort of narrative around that. But obviously, I guess the important thing to say is this is all new news to all of us. So what the paper is not trying to do is give you a full analysis of what Norfolk makes of the reforms or how we're going to implement them. We are all, as officers, digesting it at the current time and having first thoughts. But I know the committee were keen to have your input to that early on in the process, which I think is entirely appropriate. But I guess some of the comments may not be ones we can answer yet, because we are digesting it as we speak. And we actually had instruction from government on Monday this week around how we should start to respond to this. So that's very, very new news. I guess in terms of sort of an overview of the paper, I think that the bit that looks backwards at performance, I might summarise to say actually you can see a good track record there and some really, really encouraging signs in the Norfolk system. There are, across a number of metric areas, an indication that the local programme, Local First Inclusion, and the wider area strategy work has made a difference. You can see exclusions from school reducing in some areas. You can see children being successfully reintegrated back into mainstream education, having spent a period of time in one of our special resource bases, for example. You can see the early intervention offer we're putting in place, receiving good positive feedback and supporting. You can see the number of children receiving an EHCP sort of plateauing rather than continuing to rise exponentially. You can see the confidence of Norfolk schools as where they self-assess according to a framework increasing. So there are a number of reasons for optimism and where we can show the impact of the work that we've done. But it's nevertheless the case that the absolute number of children being referred for specialist provision has continued to rise, and that's true nationally as well as in Norfolk. So the ultimate goal, if you like, of trying to keep more children succeeding and flourishing in mainstream education, we couldn't say has been fully achieved by the work to date. But that's the national trend, I think, actually, and makes the case for there needing to be national reform and national investment in this space. And obviously, a few weeks ago, we had the long-awaited reforms package come through. I think my comment would be that it's been pleasing to read that a lot of what has come through in the documentation mirrors what Norfolk is already trying to achieve. In many of these areas, our programme is strongly aligned to, or actually in many ways ahead of, these national reforms. We have been investing in mainstream education, we've been investing in teams wrapped around mainstream schools, which referred to experts at hand now in the new lingo. The specialist resource bases I've mentioned, a version of that is articulated here. The alternative provision model that is recommended is a carbon copy of Norfolk's alternative education, alternative provision strategy. And I think actually, therefore, we can be pleased that what we won't need to do is a complete U-turn here. We're not going to have to bin everything that Norfolk has been doing. A lot of the infrastructure we've put in place around that in terms of partnerships, bringing groups of schools together in local zones to consider SEND need, is all aligned in broad terms to the national direction that's set out here, which is great. But obviously the reforms do also then propose some things that are beyond our local control in terms of reforms to EHCPs and the format of plans, reforms to the tribunal process, reforms to the role of the independent sector, which we couldn't influence those things. That's national policy. So at the current time, we're digesting all of this. We've been asked by government to put together a first plan, which, as it only asked on Monday, and so still reading the guidance on what that's supposed to look and feel like. But effectively, they're asking for a sort of early implementation plan. So we will be working on that now, and the emphasis of that is on the areas that don't require statutory change. So really what they're saying is there's going to be additional funding coming in, and there are some things you can just get on and do which are positive. We would like to see a plan that describes how you're going to get on and do them. And we've got a relatively short period of time over the next couple of months, really, to put together that first plan. But alongside that is obviously a national consultation on the whole package of reforms. And it's important to be clear that actually what government did on the NSND is launch a consultation rather than publish a formal paper that will be implemented and definitely become law. So we've got, in terms of our sort of bringing the system together, we're going to be trying to engage the sector, professionals of all different types in the design of that, and children and families in the design of that first plan of the things that we can do now and government are suggesting we move forward with rapidly, whilst also supporting those same stakeholders to engage in the national consultation about the wider things that are national policy. So that's kind of the mode that we're in now. You've got in the paper a summary of the key areas of the reforms. Committee members may well want to comment across all of that. But as I say, probably in terms of response, you might just get our first thoughts rather than a sort of formalised view on the reforms, because it is a big and complicated agenda. And it's probably worth saying, although the document is really long, there's a lot that it doesn't say. Certainly as we're reviewing it as officers, it throws up a lot of unanswered questions, which government will still need to put more detail to. So in that sense, it's going to become, it will be a long engagement process, and the policy, I think, will evolve and reform over time.
Thank you, James. It always amazes me that when I was watching the news on the 23rd, and the headlines are sort of coming out about this, and what thing, and there's pundits that are there in the studio, all experts on what's happening, without any of the detail that sits behind it. And how they do that, I don't quite know, but it is very good to hear that we're taking a much more reasoned approach to what's what. And also the fact that, a lot of that is sort of enforcing stuff that we've been doing as good and proper practice as well. Now, I'm obviously going to have a number of people who want to come in this. The first I've got is Ed. The next I've got Tim. I've got Maxine, and I've got Mike. I'm just going to write you all down first. But Ed is first. So,
thank you, Chair. And I think the first thing to say is good luck, guys. I don't envy you the task of trying to work your way through all of this. Secondly, also, actually, to echo your comments, Brian, I had sort of the same reaction looking at the commentary when the whole thing was announced, and getting slightly frustrated that what tends to happen in those circumstances is that one thing gets focused on when really nobody knows what the details are. And I'm also glad that you're, as I would have expected anyway, sort of disappearing into the detail and making sure that that all the aspects are covered. Two questions, I guess. The first relates to local first inclusion in particular, and forgive me, this may be clear in the paper, but it's so tangled I couldn't kind of quite work it out. Obviously, the programme, when it was set up, came with a set of conditions and inducements, and I'm not quite clear. Is that programme, those sets of obligations, just kind of like, do we just carry on, or is it put on hold, or do we just ignore it now and just get on with the other stuff? That's the one thing. The second thing, which will definitely, I'm sure, fall into the category of we don't know yet, but I'll ask it anyway. Obviously, in the paper, you talk about the DFE taking on more management of the high needs block, but that no expectation that would change. Or no, perhaps that's not what you said, that there would still be an expectation that the council would have a local role in managing the high needs block. I just wonder if that sounds like quite a difficult circle to square, and I just wondered if you've got any thoughts on what that might look like in practice.
Okay, so
James, just before I come to you, I noticed Penny put a hand up. Is it to respond on that point, Penny, or do you want to come in more generally?
If I may, very quickly.
Of course,
Chair,
yeah.
I chaired the East of England region local government meeting this week where the white paper was discussed. And I think if James may have been correct, I think I'm correct, but this first plan, the government have asked to submit that within 15 weeks, which is a bit of an ask. But James is quite right. We are, in many areas of what's in the white paper, we are ahead, which makes it slightly easier for us as well. Easier, it's not the right word, but at least we have experience in the field already rather than others which may not have. And there's a lot of stuff in this paper which really needs to be, the detail of it is really not there in some aspects of it. So it's like schools having to the EHCPs, but also there's going to be another sort of personal plan as well for each child. So as we all know, EHCPs, that's an industry really, and I think they're setting up another one as well. And also, I think they're putting £200 million into the pot for training, but we are short of speech and language, educational psychologists nationally. So we don't quite know how that's also going to pan out. So there's a huge amount of work to be undertaken by our team to even complete this 15-week paper response.
Thank you, Penny. James, anything you wish to add?
Yeah, so in terms of the two questions you asked me, the first one is easy, the second one is impossible. So the safety valve programme as it was previously constructed has ended, and they've written to us more formally actually recently to sort of doubly confirm that is the case. So in terms of that programme, we've moved on, and this is new policy now, and therefore the expectations that were there don't apply. To be clear, a lot of the work we're doing locally absolutely will continue as part of the new plan, pivoting a little bit in line with the new reforms. So the programme we have locally is very much still alive and kicking, but the safety valve construct with government they have formally moved on from. The question around the relationship with government at the point at which they take on responsibility for the high needs block is a question actually I asked of the regional director of the DFE recently, and the answer was we'll get back to you. I think it's really hard to know. I think the way the most recent policy paper has come to us certainly still implies that they see the local authority as the convener of the system here and providing the leadership happily alongside health more than previously to bring together all stakeholders to try to deliver something successful. So as best we understand it, that will continue even at the point at which the high needs block is funded in a different way. The DfE will definitely want a lot of scrutiny of that, particularly if they're picking up the tab in a more direct way. But what I don't know is whether they'll want to be much more hands-on than they are today in deciding what to spend on what, or whether it will just be a question of us doing it locally and they'll sort of monitor. But I can imagine it will change the dynamic, because if, for example, the reforms don't have the financial impact of reducing deficits in a number of years, they'll want to command and control that, because that's government's instinct. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But we haven't got an articulation of how they see that relationship working at the moment.
Thank you. And I think Nikki wants to come in at this point as well, please.
Yeah, just to add on to what James was saying, I think the focus of the reforms as well brings an additional dynamic insofar that there's an intended direction of travel for more funding to be passported into the school system, for schools to manage and control directly and organise resources and provision for children without the necessity for some of the bureaucracy that can go around accessing the high needs block. So there's a real different set of dynamics proposed between the DfE, local authorities, schools, commanding resources themselves to work through as part of our local area partnership. But I thought that was an important element as well, perhaps that's not so much spoken about in the paper, just to make members aware of.
Thanks, Nikki. I'll move on next. I think I've got you, Tim. Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, Penny touched on my point briefly, or my first point briefly, in terms of capacity, because the reforms will require some substantial increases in SENCO specialist teachers, therapists, etc. And I wondered what assessment had been carried out in respect of the workforce gap and how that would be filled, because that could really continue to be a bottleneck. And secondly, the reforms come with new funding streams, but are they expected to cover the full cost of delivery, or will we need to be absorbing significant additional pressure to meet the new national requirements? Thank you.
I'll lead off, but again, colleagues might tap me on the shoulder to say they've got more to add. That work, in terms of a detailed analysis of the particular, of all the workforce gaps we might have, where is the most acute and where we put the investment, that's the work of the next 15 weeks, as Penny describes it, to put together that plan. And we want to seek views of quite a few stakeholders. As you say, there's a bit about what can be afforded within how much money you've got, but also do the people actually exist who might do the work. And we know that educational psychologists, for example, typically are roles that are very hard to come by. But that's true across some of the other professions. But I do think the funding is welcome, and I do think there's a real opportunity here, and there absolutely are some opportunities to build a bigger team, if you like, around schools and settings with that new national funding. There isn't any explicit expectation that local authority areas absorb any of the pressure themselves. It's meant to be new national funding that's meant to be in addition to all the existing funding to grow, rather than any kind of explicit match funding expectation or something like that. But it is worth being really clear that even though a lot of these services are funded by the high needs block, which is separate to the main council budget, the council absolutely is, in a whole variety of ways, putting its own core budget into support for children with special educational needs and disabilities, and will probably continue to do so. So there definitely won't be a game of, oh, well, now it's all funded by the DfE, we'll substitute out our cost. We need all the capacity we can get wrapped around this sector. So in that sense, there will be a significant expectation that we continue to make our local investments, including from council's own coffers, where that is appropriate. Anyone understand anything? Dawn might have something.
I've got Jane wanting to come in next.
And
Dawn, I think, as well.
I was just going to
Jane's
add,
in first.
Yeah, I was just going to add that actually we're bucking the trend around educational psychologists in Norfolk because of the work we've been doing in terms of the SEND inclusion support model and our move towards non-traded support for schools. That is a really attractive offer to educational psychologists, and so where other local authorities have been experiencing real challenge in that space, and historically, I think Norfolk also did actually, we're seeing a real difference and a turnaround there. So we're actually approaching a very complete team, which is great news. And then also I was going to add to that the fact that the work we're doing with our multidisciplinary teams to support schools and empower them to feel able and knowledgeable around meeting the needs of complicated young people, that is all part of developing the workforce. So they, in many ways, exist. And so part of our job is to ensure that they have the knowledge and the information, and that is what we're doing.
That's good news. I mean, I know that's always been an issue. Is that down to local training or?
So yes, so we have training and advice that goes out from our SEND advisors and across many of our teams who go out and work with schools. Some of that is at request and some of that is part of our team around the school conversations that we have as part of the SEND inclusion support model.
Excellent, thank you. And Dawn wants to come in as well.
Thank you. It was just a couple of things to add to partly to what James was saying and then to Jane. So on the, in relation to the sort of whether there may be an impact to the local authority or not in that space around these costs. So one of the things we've had is we've had the obviously had the policy paper that's been published and the consultation, and we've now received this commission earlier this week from the government in terms of what they want us to do in preparing a plan with the system. One of the missing pieces in that still is actually what funding will come locally to Norfolk, and that's at the moment on a to be published in spring. So we're presuming that that's pretty imminent in terms of, obviously that's quite important in then, and that's around the country, obviously that will be quite important in terms of generating that plan. So there's still probably a few pieces of the jigsaw to come, I guess, in that stage, but we are expecting that that element is fully funded. One of the bits that we haven't got any clarity on, and again, this is a national picture, is although there's been announcements in terms of historical deficits, one of the bits that is sort of to be determined or to be confirmed is around the funding over the next 2 financial years in terms of the funding of high needs deficits and things in that space and how that fits with the new funding and things that's been allocated. The other bit was just following on from in relation to particularly around our educational psychologists and the teams working in that space. One of the things we've been exploring for quite a period of time and piloting to make sure that we get it right is around the use of AI in terms of supporting those staff with the sort of the more mundane natures of the tasks that they're completing, to use the AI to do that, to free up those staff and to have more time available to do some of the relational work. And obviously that sort of, the work that we've been doing in that space will feed into this planning in terms of actually the capacity and things that we have to be working with children and their families through those experts. Thank you.
Interesting stuff. I didn't know we were using AI for such things. James, please.
One point that Dawn surprised me by not mentioning there, because she almost always does, is that it's worth being clear with the committee that we don't get the existing deficit paid off the 90% of that, so whatever that is, 180 million for Norfolk. That is triggered by the acceptance of this new plan that we have 15 weeks to write. So if actually that plan is not considered robust, it will then go through a second round of being looked at, and that funding will never be released. So it is materially important to Norfolk County Council that it is a robust plan. So no pressure.
I was going to say absolutely no pressure. It's just only 180 million pounds critical there, so don't no pressure at all. I've got quite a list, but Ed, is that on that point you want to come in, or you just? It's just a point, right? Okay. In which case, the next I've got on my list is Councillor Webb, please, Maxine.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so also good luck from me too, because you know, it's really important and it's huge. So you know, I wish you well. I just wanted to ask about obviously the plan that you've got to put together and the ongoing work and impact of, you know, everything stays the same, but it's also really changing, doesn't it? Because, you know, the children are still being educated and still experiencing the system as it is now while you're working on, you know, what's to come. And so I wanted to ask, is there a requirement as part of the plan for it to involve you know, working with families alongside it. And obviously when you have the safety valve, that was very much something that had to be done in sort of isolation, and how that, you know, so is that going to change around this? Because I'm just really conscious of the way that families are experiencing this change, and how they are, you know, being there's so much communication out there, there's so much going on, and obviously there's a lot of anxiety. So yeah, sorry, my original question is what would probably have done. Yeah, thanks.
So it's really keeping the normal, what's been going on the road, make sure that all happens as it should, whilst the transformation takes place, whilst we move towards the plan being prepared and then implemented. Yeah.
Yeah, and if there is any requirement from the government for their voice or families to be part of that plan at this stage or not.
So colleagues behind me might want to chip in. But
Jane's got a mic on, I'll come to her.
I'm raring to go. So where I would sit this is that Norfolk anyway would want to work collaboratively with all partners. What is useful is that the intent within the paperwork that's coming through from government is also around partnership working, which is excellent. What we are really focusing on right now is the maturity matrix, which we made reference to in the paper, and that asks that we benchmark ourselves and that we work with all our partners around benchmarking where we sit ourselves in terms of the maturity of our working together. So in answering your question, yes, we've got opportunities where we're going out and talking to people either through webinars or through face-to-face, and so actively seeking people's input, and we will be doing that throughout the nature of the development of our plan. And I would say that the matrix, the way we understand it currently, is that we will be asked to continue to add and evolve our benchmarking position from the now into the future so that we can show progress. But in answering your question around families, obviously we would continue to want to work with them and have their voice throughout. And where we began even before the 23rd of February, back last summer when we were thinking that the reforms might arrive in the autumn, as we'd started to talk about it through our social media, we'd started to talk about it and saying, actually, Norfolk has a plan. It's working really well. We're seeing, you know, as James referred to at the beginning, we're seeing the benefits of the ways we've been working for some time in Norfolk. We have a confidence in that plan. It aligns itself with what's come through in the white paper. So actually, we keep calm, we carry on, we hear and see what comes out of the consultation period, but actually we're really assured that what we're doing is the right thing for young people and families.
Thank you. Jane, I've got Nikki wanting to come in as well on this one. Nikki, please.
Yeah, just to again add to what Jane's expressed. I mean, co-production and working with parents, carers and young people is essentially baked in throughout the whole of the reform paper, and also the guidance in relation to the local reform plan. So the expectations very much are there from the DFE, and of course that's how we would want to work in Norfolk regardless anyway. We're already kick-starting that piece of work. We haven't delayed on that. We held meetings earlier this week and set forward plans through key colleagues to engage with Family Voice Norfolk, but other wider groups representing parents and carers locally. We're really interested in views about how they would see the importance of some of the things we're being asked to comment on in the reform plan, particularly things like the experts at hand offer, the use of local investment, the sufficiency planning, and capital, etc. And, lots of opportunities to do that, and much more widely as well. There's the Family Voice Norfolk conference tomorrow that we've got a delegation going along to, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions from parents and carers there. We have the Making Sense of Send events. So, we've got a whole infrastructure, and we've pretty much kicked that off straight away as soon as the guidance and the plan landed.
And Dawn?
It was just to add, I guess, that we're also not viewing this as just this 15-week period of developing this initial reform plan, which is actually slightly less than 15 weeks, but in a sense of saying that's the first bit of the plan. What we're expecting is that there will then be further refinement and development of that plan, particularly once the consultation has completed and the government then announces its steps forward in that. And we'd be expecting that they would expect us to be submitting further plans, but also we would certainly want to be doing that with, in conjunction with all of the partners, including voices of families and children and things within that. So it's certainly the way that we want to be working.
Excellent, thank you. I think I've got Mike next. Councillor Smith-Clear.
Thanks, Brian. Well, I do certainly welcome the government's focus on SEND, and I realise how difficult it is, and I appreciate what's going on behind the scenes. And there appears to be so much joining up, even at this early stage. And I recognise the importance of how you're working with this reform plan. There's one particular area I'm interested, particularly as this transition takes place, and that's the reintegration of young people back into mainstream. And again, we know that that is one of the big steps forward, but it's that consideration of the success of that reintegration. Particularly interested where we're working with this plan to ensure that that reintegration remains, and possibly looking at how many young people drop out of that to be reintegrated again. Because if we are looking at that strategy, that appropriate strategy, particularly with this growing white paper, how can we possibly identify and mitigate that possible circumstance? Thank you.
So again, I'll lead off, and colleagues will probably want to come in. So I think it's worth saying, the idea that some children might need to be outside of mainstream class for a period of time and then supported to reintegrate has been a pillar of our work in Norfolk throughout the whole programme. We are pleased to see that that is aligned with the government's intention through this work. As I sort of said in the intro, actually, in some areas, linked to our SRB programme in particular, we can really see that succeeding in most cases, and as well as tracking, did they reintegrate and did the first few weeks go well, we do try to track a longer trajectory to make sure that is sustained. I think a key difference we would highlight is the business of children staying on roll. So where they go to an SRB, even if they go to a physical building that's elsewhere, they are still connected to the mainstream education sector and have that sort of partial experience. Where children completely leave one setting and end up in either in an alternative provision school or an alternative provision placement, we're having much less success at this point in time in securing successful reintegration. And one of the points in the policy paper, the National Reforms, indicates a direction towards children staying on roll and attached to the school, even if they were out of that school for whatever reason. So they sort of retain a responsibility, even if the recognition is that they do need to spend a period of time being educated in a different way, which broadly speaking we would welcome. Again, that's an area where there isn't that much detail in the paper around exactly how that is to be achieved, but we would see that broadly positive, because at the moment we're succeeding around reintegration where we can keep children close to mainstream. Once they're sort of fully out, reintegration is a rarity.
Thank you. I've got John next, please. Oh, I've missed. Sorry, Nikki wants to add.
Thanks. Thanks, Brian.
Sorry, I missed you.
Yeah, I guess just to take it one stage further as well in terms of that reintegration and sort of stickability is the transition to post-16 being central and obviously a core component. What our trend data tells us around children with special educational needs, and particularly those with EHCPs, is that those who attend mainstream generally have more successful transitions into post-16 education comparatively to other children within the system and in special schools. Now, some of that you might expect in terms of degree of complexity of children and young people. But if we're able to get the journey back to mainstream solidified prior to post-16, then the likelihood of the stickability beyond into further education, employment and training is likely to be much more successful. So that's an additional kind of component, I guess, in terms of outcomes for children that we're wanting to see as part of our work around facilitating greater numbers to be in our mainstream system.
Right, thank you. John, got you next, please. Councillor Fisher.
Thanks, Chairman. Did I hear you say, James, that LFI is effectively now finished?
No, you didn't know. So Safety Valve is finished, which was a government construct and programme. Obviously, our local programme, Local First Inclusion, will continue. We will consider whether in the next phase of it, we might call it something different. I wouldn't rule that out. But effectively, the programme that we're delivering still stands and will be continuing to deliver, and we'll be layering additional work on top of it linked to the reforms, or sort of, refining the way it's delivered, but the programme continues.
Fine, that's okay.
You went into a panic, you misheard that.
I wondered how we were going to progress, but if it's still going fine.
Okay. I haven't seen any... oh, you've got something else, John?
There is another... Come on. The fact the consultation has to be completed by, or responded by the 18th of May, and I notice that yes, you're engaging with Family Voice. And from a democratic process, does it have to be signed off by Cabinet? I'm just conscious of the fact that the 18th of May is a strange date when we've got elections coming up, and the fact the government decided they wanted to have elections, and most of the Shire counties, I suspect, which are dealing with this particular bill, will need to be consulted and commented. I just wondered how the democratic process will fit in.
Yeah, well spotted. We spotted that as well, and we're not sure that national government have necessarily fully appreciated that. So just to be clear, there's two. In terms of deadlines, there's the consultation, the national consultation, which we'll be responding to. There's also the formation of the local SEND reforms plan, which has the deadline that Penny referenced in terms of 15 weeks. But both of those things are happening this summer. And in terms of submitting a plan, it is absolutely the case. The point at which we'll be finalising the plan is the point at which the council elections and a new administration will coming into power. So there will be, that has been highlighted, I think, by almost every council nationally to central government, and they're having a think about how best to administer that. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge. It would also have to be signed off by the ICB, the Local Inclusion Partnership. They want a draft of the plan about a month before the actual plan, so that the deadlines go back and backwards. So it won't be an easy thing. We may have to stand up some extraordinary governance in order to get that through in some way, I would suspect.
So it's fair to say that with this all happening over the period of time with elections in the middle, we as a committee the committee doesn't meet again until July. Obviously at that point new cabinets will be established, election results will be known, and so is there, or will there be a delegation to a portfolio holder at that time for the submission? Because otherwise it'll be even longer before there can be any political oversight of what the direct submission will look like. And obviously we're picking up from this a theme of what needs to be included and the direction that we've got. But, you know, our role as well as scrutiny, as I said before, is policy development. Government have said this is the way it's going to be, folks. We're changing aspects within this. It would be great if there was some political oversight to it locally, but timing for us, because we've got elections this year when many of the other Shire counties would have had elections last year. You know, they were postponed by government for a year. We now are going ahead, and that's obviously going to mean that this particular piece of work is going to fall within that sort of I say gap, but it shouldn't be. It should be seamless. So how can we ensure that that hits the work programme of what this committee looks at going forward into the future, and also future cabinet member will have it on their psyche very early on, in their role. Penny, Councillor Carpenter, any thoughts from yourself as portfolio holder on how this ought to be managed so that there is a seamless carry on between yourself and whoever follows you?
In short, today, no, but I will be discussing that with the leader of the council, because again it's a very tight timelines put upon us by our government at the moment. So this is not the first time this has happened. So I will ask the leader, and I will ask members of cabinet in consultation with James and the director of Children's Services to see how we can manage this. But as James has already said, I think that's already been pointed out to government. You know, the situation we are in and other Shire counties are in as well.
Thank you for that. I think it's so important going forward that you know, there is that continuity. Whoever follows us, you know, have got to run with the ball, and this is a particular ball you can't afford to drop. I've got Councillor Maxfield next, please, Ed. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I should have jumped in when you gave me the chance, because you've actually anticipated, both you and John have anticipated the question I was going to ask. But just to sort of pinpoint it a bit more, I guess there's not just an issue around the consultation period and the transition. There's also quite an important question that I'm not clear on the answer of around executive sign-off. I just had a quick look. There's a cabinet meeting scheduled for the 8th of June. There's a full council meeting scheduled for the 28th of May, and then not again until the 21st of July. Obviously, extra meetings can be put in, but I'm not actually sure if it's a cabinet decision or a council decision, or actually if it sits with SARA to adopt the new policy. So that was my main question. The second one that came up, I was just going to say as well, which is completely unrelated to that, but on the back of what Mike was saying, I hadn't actually spotted the emphasis on reintegration, and I think that's quite an exciting thing if it goes beyond the cohort of kids in SRBs, because that's kind of built into that model. But if it does go beyond that group of children, then I don't underestimate the level of cultural change that would be required from the institutions, and potentially the sort of job that would need to be done working with families to get them to understand what was being done as well. So that doesn't need a comment other than to leave it on the agenda for future. But the question about executive sign-off, I think, is quite important.
I mean,
I'm looking to Sarah now, James. You're going to be gazumped, James. I'm going to Sarah.
Absolutely, Brian. Well, I don't have an answer for you, but you can be assured that this question is being asked. I'm asking it very directly of senior officials, because we want to know the answer to that question in the same way that you do. But it is very clear that there is some very unmovable timescales that central government have established. So once we're clear as to that they understand our local circumstances, hopefully they will give us the clarity in terms of where the sign-offs are going to lie. It will also then enable us to work with the new administration exceptionally quickly to start ensuring that it comes into our local governance as quickly as possible. So I recognise all the questions that you've asked. We're asking the same questions, and as soon as we know answers, we'll be sharing them.
It's really important to know that that's on the radar, and I mean, it's a difficult situation for Norfolk because we've got elections. Other areas that have previously, had elections last year, whenever, that it's not going to be relevant to them, but it's definitely relevant to us, and there needs to be political oversight. This is so vitally important. And that, in turn, takes me to our recommendations as a committee, or actions required, which is to consider the key items for discussion within the report, particularly the state of play and headlines within the government send reforms, which I think we've done. Context of the published reforms, recommend to Cabinet whether there is additional activity that the system in Norfolk could be undertaking to increase mainstream inclusion within the resources available within the whole system. And I think the only way that we will be able to do that is look to the submission when it's there and ready to go, or in the case of timing, it will be once it's already gone. But it really is an item that I think this committee and Cabinet will need to consider at its earliest opportunity after the May elections. So I think that's something that really we have to make certain those of us that are around, if any of us are around, that is done. And also comment on how future member oversight and engagement could take place as NCC prepares its response to reforms, which I think covers that off. Any further recommendations we have at this point in time? Maxine?
I just wonder whether there should be something more formal in there about, on the third point, comment on how it could take place. Maybe put an assurance in that, you know, I don't know the exact time, like you said, 15 weeks, so how those timelines are going to impact, that there should be a requirement for committee to see, you know, to be able to comment and see the report.
Yeah, and I think through our officer team and officer support, I think Tristan, in terms of, he's made a note to make sure that if every single one of us changes, that at least there'll be some continuity, that the committee will be looking for that going forward. But it is vitally important. So, and Cyril, sorry. Yeah,
obviously, I'm not up for election, so...
No, you're not. You'll be around, which is good.
But in terms of that, what we're all saying is this needs to be looked at by committee, whether that's, you know, the council committee or this committee, before it goes off. Is there any way of, in between the 7th of May, when hopefully you'll all get re-elected, etc., and the 18th of May, when it has to be submitted, is there any way that we could look at that in that intervening period?
It's difficult because committee allocations don't happen instantly after the election.
In terms of the need for putting forward, like you were saying, that little bit of money that we'd like to get back from the government, and important that this is done correctly, and I'm sure you will, but it's that, you know, the oversight that might need looking at.
Yeah, just I'll come to yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Cyril. So if I can explain sort of the governance around it a little bit, the decision is one thing, and obviously that's something we'll work through with officers. The scrutiny of that decision is a little bit trickier, and the reason why it's trickier is that obviously elections from the point of 8th of May onwards, we have new members, but they won't be allocated to committees until after the council AGM on the 28th of May. So effectively, that time period you've set out there is kind of tricky. Something we're going to have to look at as part of this overall decision. I was going to cover it as part of the work programme as well, but sorry, the short answer is that it's very, very tricky. We basically can't hold meetings in that period.
I mean, I think the point was made earlier on as well. You're actually going to have governance, democratic services really look into this and see if there's anything in the art of the possible, because at the moment there isn't under our current constitution.
No, you're right, Councillor Riley. We have got to make sure this is done. It's important, and we don't want the ball dropped. Sarah.
I just wanted to add an extra level of assurance. So I'm clearly talking to Harvey Bullen in his executive role, and he's equally, along with me, having those conversations with the Department of Education to make those very points, so that we're clear that if we are being asked to make an executive decision in the absence of our political governance being established, that's understood, and we'll be bringing it forward. So we're looking for assurances as to how this can be done in a way that is in the interests of this council, doesn't create any delay, and what we don't want to do is to create a situation where there isn't proper scrutiny, but we're going to have to work with government on this. It's going to be something we'll have to...
Absolutely. So it will be an evolving issue, and obviously whilst we aren't scheduled to have a meeting between now and elections, I effectively stay in post, Penny stays in post, and it would be handy if we were kept abreast of anything that happens between now and then obviously the time between when the new cabinet is formed and the new administration takes shape. Well, obviously they'll be brought up to speed as soon as is possible. And I think as a committee, I think we would like to, I think there's a will from everyone that's spoken thus far to make sure that does happen. And I'm sure with the good officers that we have, that will happen. Jane's put her hand up to volunteer to make sure it all happens.
Oh,
Thank you, Jane.
Yes. front of the queue. All I was going to say is just, obviously a lot of this is around a response to the consultation. We have the plan. we know where we're headed, and so there will be further iterations of the plan once we have more detail. So it was just to reassure around it's not all or nothing. You know, we will keep bringing back.
We've got to have a plan. We've got to have a submission. And it's vitally important that we get the reimbursement of all the expenditure that we've made, in previous years. And I mean, that's not the ultimate goal. I mean, Harvey Bullen probably would say it was, but we need a plan anyway, because we need to work to the new regime that the government is setting for us in any case. So that's vitally important. Councillor Maxfield, I've got you, please. Next.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to say, obviously, just to provide sort of hopefully further reassurance to Cyril and possibly others. Obviously, ultimately the decision doesn't need to sit with us. That would be an executive decision. It's not perfect. It's not ideal for us to be doing the next committee, whoever they are, to be doing the scrutiny after the decision. But that is an option. We can indeed do decision scrutiny after the decision has been taken. That's also within our remit. So that's something that I'm sure we'll be considering. Maxine, you had another point to raise.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted clarification. So there's the maturity matrix plan thing. There's the response to the consultation, and then there's the plan. Are there three things sort of happening here? Because and have they all got different dates on them?
Yes.
Yes, all of which are not helpful, but there we go, we can't help that.
Yeah, there are three separate things: the maturity matrix and the reforms plan linked together, if that makes sense. So the submission there, but the consultation, the national consultation, is separate and has a separate deadline. I think it is worth emphasising this plan we're talking about here is really, really important, and obviously materially important on the finances. But I think, as Dawn and Jane have described, it's not the only plan. There will be further iterations of it, and it actually captures one part of the reforms. It won't actually cover everything that we will have to do, and it will be quite a technical document. It won't be a sort of political version of this. It will be a technical deployment plan for how we will spend the extra money. That's not to say it doesn't need oversight. It still does, but it will be, in that sense, quite a sort of technical implementation plan for the early parts of the reforms, rather than a comprehensive plan around everything Norfolk will do about SEND.
Right, committee, hopefully you are fully reassured and agreement with recommendations as presented, including the provisions that we're placing upon for future panels. All happy? Agreed, thank you. Moves us, thanks very much, officers, on that one. It's not an easy situation to be in, so best of luck to you all on getting that done by the date. Thank you. Moves us on to our forward work program. Oh, sorry, Sarah.
No, it's quite all right, but seeing as you are moving on to your forward work programme, I just wanted to take the opportunity myself, on behalf of my team, to thank you and John and the committee for the work you've done in relation to your scrutiny function. And as professionals, it's really important to us that we participate in the relationship which is around support and challenge. And that serves our population really well when we do that in an open and respectful manner. So kind of thank you for the work that you've been doing, and hopefully we'll continue to have a productive relationship with future scrutiny.
Thank you indeed. Yes, absolutely. So thank you very much for that. And that does move us on to our forward work programme, which starts on page 43. And I'm going to Tristan on this one, please, Tristan.
Thank you very much, Chair. So, yeah, a few things for us to consider here. Number one, we've got the VCSE Task and Finish Group that had its first meeting a couple of weeks ago, with Councillor Mike Smith-Clare chairing that. We've discussed the need for that group to report back, and it's looking like the opportunity for it to report back would be at July's meeting. But I'm conscious as well that at July's meeting we've already got a few items on there, one of which was the education policy refresh, which we already moved. I suppose due to the idea that we'd like potentially new members to be set up with something that's sort of ready to go and something for them to look at, it's a question of whether we'd be happy to work programme that report back from that working group onto July. And then we would look to put the education policy refresh potentially to September, which gives a solid year effectively since the refresh came in, and seems like a sensible time to be reporting back, because I know that when James first came to committee with it, he said, you know, don't expect everything to change in 6 months, and so that seems like a sensible point for work programming that, just looking around, seeing if there's general assent to that. Yeah.
All okay with that?
Super. The other two things on my list was the return of the home to school transport item. So members expressed a desire to see that come back to this committee at some point. And we're looking, you know, on the work programme, we've got dates planned for November, but not items. So I'd suggest perhaps we look to November or January for that item to go, but over to members to give their view on that.
Okay, that we put that to November?
Yeah, agreed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, the big one that we were discussing, obviously, if I can provide a little bit of answer to Councillor Maxfield's question, I wouldn't want to preempt anything the monitoring officer would give, but I think that would be a decision for the executive. The one you mentioned, policy framework decisions would go to full council. I don't see this being one because it's to do with our local first inclusion rather than the overall Flourish strategy, which is on the policy framework. So I see that as being an executive decision. We just need to look at, obviously, the scrutiny of that, whether there's anything we can do around informal arrangements with that. So obviously, if we can't hold a meeting in May, but the members are, members are still here, that's not to say that officers can't have informal working groups with members to get thoughts. And obviously, it would be a shame to lose the experience of many of the members here. So that's something we can absolutely look at and we'll take away. And just to say as well that, yeah, post-scrutiny of the decision is also an option. But just to say that's very much on our radar as children's officers have flagged, and we'll take that one away. That's it from me. Thanks.
All okay? I think there might be a few that are new on the new, next committee, and we're giving them plenty to do. So they're new and they'll have plenty to do, which is good. Anything anyone has individually that they want to consider as a forward work item, or do we feel that we've given those that follow us plenty to do? I think we have, actually. I think we have. Yeah. John, do you want to have a word as Vice Chair?
Really just to thank all the familiar faces here today. And wish you all the best for the future, because this is my last meeting. I will be standing down in May, as I wanted to do for the last 12 months. And I will remind you that there are some chocolate biscuits and some shortbreads for those people who think that chocolate's not good for them. I've never found that particular place, but anyway, I just thank you all and all the best for the future.
John, that's very sad because it's going to miss your birthday.
Yes, indeed. And with that, I say that this committee is now closed. Thank you all, and thanks, officers, very much for your support and forbearance for the questions that you've been presented, not just at this meeting, but at the last year's worth. So thank you all very much. Thank you.